This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And on this episode, Jonathan's going to be taking a look at a highly requested game of yours, Destiny 2. And boy, does he have some thoughts on Bungie's weapon design.
Oh lord, right. Pause there. Yikes. This is looking a bit like an archetypal cursed gun to me.
If there are any other games, guns, and mechanics that you guys want to see Jonathan break down, let us know in the comment section below, and make sure to subscribe as well, as we've got tons of content just like this on the channel, including Loadout, a show where we take a look at the history and impact of some of the most iconic weapons in gaming. But without further ado, let's take a look at the guns of Destiny 2.
I like the design of this, I have to say. It's looking very much like, well, it's a mishmash. It's got some Chiappa Rhino in there with a barrel that's in line with the bottom chamber in the cylinder. So the idea is there to help control recoil. Same for the faceted cylinder. It's not the only design with one of those, but and the logic there is just to keep the gun narrower. However, the way this works is a bit weird in respect of that faceted cylinder, because they've gone for a quirky reload. We've got a swing out cylinder on a crane or a yoke, but rather than the cases being pushed out or falling out and fresh rounds being put in, we've got a reloadable cylinder inside a cylinder. Insert exhibit meme here, which is, you know, okay, fair enough. But why though? Because you're reducing the capacity of the cylinder. You'd fit fewer rounds in. Now this is, I'm not familiar with the technical lore of this game. I may well discover that there's a reason for this, but if we're assuming conventional cartridges here, or even caseless ammunition, you want to use the maximum real estate of that round cylinder, or in this case flattened off, but the inside is round. You don't want to compromise that by making a reloadable unit that is smaller. We've got 13 rounds in this thing. Now, if you visualize a revolver cylinder for 13 rounds, it's going to be about that, I would say. Makes sense that you'd have to come up with a new sci-fi feed system for this thing, but I don't think they've stuck the landing with that, because it doesn't seem to make any sense to me. If this was some sort of energy weapon, sure, but this is definitively a projectile weapon. However the ammunition's supposed to work, there ain't enough space in that unit.
For one.
Right, this game is really taxing my brain, which is probably an indicator that I should switch it off. So we've got this thing, and it's obviously a spin on the Old West lever action rifle, but it's so complicated. It's got a spiral fluted bolt, which someone has obviously seen on like a high-end bolt action or something and has incorporated that because it looks cool. Doesn't really make much sense on this. And we've got the John Browning bolt system that's in the Winchester 1892, for example, rather than the classic toggle action. It's not quite the Browning action, but it does have the bolt that protrudes out the back to cock the hammer. So there's some mechanical functionality going on there. And then we can see the rounds, conventional looking, they look almost like steel cased 5.56mm rounds, interestingly. And they are held on a leather shell holder that is part of, strapped to this very elaborate wooden stock. I'd have to say I like the overall design. The sort of black and gold and the dark wood, it actually looks pretty good to me. It's just very busy compared to a real gun. And the cartridges being held opposing each other rather than all going the same way would make quick loading a bit awkward. And mechanically, I can't really figure out how it's feeding those rounds. There's a tube below the barrel that would normally be the magazine, but it looks too short and not kind of connected up to the mechanism in a way that would work.
Double down.
Okay, in trying to figure out if this thing is mechanically viable, I have spotted a weird quirk of the iron sights. So it does have iron sights, as you can see. Looks like it has several. It's got a groove in what looks like a lot like a conventional tangent sight, but it has the ramps for the tangent on top of the tangent. So it's got design elements of a real rifle sight, but they're upside down. And then so you could use the groove, the notch in the back of that as your sight. Then there's a sort of gold-coloured horseshoe thing that looks like it could be a rear sight. And then there's a flip-up front sight with a round protector and a gold post sitting behind that. And I can't see how that would even flip up to act as a rear sight. And it isn't a rear sight because it's a post. This really makes my brain hurt. I think all of that is just included because it looks busy and interesting, but it doesn't make a lick of sense as far as I can tell. We've certainly got some visually striking weapon designs in this game, that's for sure. So we've got a shotgun, but it's got a very elaborate semi-pistol grip thumbhole stock. Some kind of weird energy system installed in the butt, and there's what looks almost like a cylinder with a sort of gold lattice arrangement with more energy contained within it. But then we've got some sort of elaborate feed mechanism with some pulls and doohickeys and what looks almost like a cylinder. So I wonder if this is going to be a revolver shotgun. We've got cooling holes that look like they're in the barrel, not in a jacket. So and there's a cable, some sort of cable actuated system or a rod, or I don't know, like a wire running across the top. Another completely wacky gun. Let's see what it does. This is a really obvious thing to say, but a very gamey idea for a gun. Either the character is off-camera manipulating some kind of mode switch or something, or it's just magic, and aiming down sights gives you a single shot, and hip firing gives you shotgun, which is interesting in terms of gameplay, in that you'd normally have either a spread of shot that's devastating up close and terrible at range, you know, the video game trope, or like one shot that's reasonably powerful. Giving the player both in one weapon is an interesting idea. I don't know how that shakes out in terms of gameplay. And then when the gun breaks open, for 'tis a break open gun, we see 8 rounds in an intriguing arrangement, 4 and then 4 on the outside of that, a sort of weird geometric pattern. But of course we don't have 8 barrels, we have 1 barrel, so it's almost like they're funneling down, and then, as I say, somehow you're selecting whether you fire one of them, or is it all of them into one point of aim? Don't know. Or whether you're firing all of them / in a spread. All of which I could probably live with if this was some magic future ammunition and weapon system that I just can't get my head around because it's, you know, I'm a 21st century person. But these rounds look totally conventional, you know, standard brass case rounds, percussion primers in the base, and they are somehow working with this magical gun to achieve the effect that we just talked about. So it's another kind of mind blower, unfortunately for me. Oh lord, right. Pause there. Yikes. This is looking a bit like an archetypal cursed gun to me. Yeah, I don't really know what we've got. I was going to say we've got 2 barrels and then 2 more barrels kind of held on with a very large sort of circlip plumbing piece of kit, and then there's another one wrapped around the centre. But I'm increasingly unsure what they're holding on, because those things seem to be... No, I'm going to go with the additional 2 barrels at the bottom are actually being held on as upgrades of some sort, although I don't imagine that they are upgrades you add in the game. This is clearly meant to be the art design for this gun. And then we've got a sort of over-engineered looking buttstock and a tiny magazine that looks like I can see the rounds in the front of it. They go all the way to the bottom and there's no spring visible to actually feed them up. But hey, it's the future. Maybe they're magnetically fed. Don't know. Let's see what this thing does, because it's not making a huge amount of sense to me. This thing is nuts. So we've got our single magazine feeding 1 primary barrel that works like a slow firing sort of assault rifle thing, and then the other barrels appear to be completely random, and then the character is slapping the side of the gun, which changes a setting and your pattern of shot effectively. giving you sort of a pseudo shotgun effect. Not seen this before, as you can probably tell. Just trying to think how it might work in real life. It's just not working, is it? There's no way that additional barrels strapped onto a gun, there's no way to get rounds into those. I'm either missing something, or it's more space magic. Okay, I'm going to need to address the name of this thing, which I've only just found out. So it's called Cerberus +1. So I can only imagine someone coming up with a concept for a 3-barreled gun, as in like the 3-headed hound that guards the gates of hell in mythology. And then someone said, wouldn't it be funny if we put another barrel on it and called it Cerberus +1? Thus completely undermining the whole concept of the name. I don't know whether to be disappointed or proud about that, really. Wow, this is especially wacky looking. Luckily, I have the information here to tell me what this is. So the Gjallarhorn, I'm gonna go with rocket launcher. I'm glad they told me it's a rocket launcher. I may not have figured that out. Well, it does have a huge barrel, or is that a barrel? It has fins on it. Normally, things with fins fly. So I look forward to seeing whether that's the warhead and the whole thing flies out. In which case, I'm not sure those fins on the front are going to do much. But anyway, weirdly, this reminds me of some of our combination weapons at the Royal Armouries. We don't have anything that looks like this, but we have crazy attempts from throughout history where people have tried to make a boarding pike that's also got guns on it, or an axe that's also got 5 guns buried in it with different mechanisms. Crazy stuff like that. And this thing strikes me as, more than anything else, similar to that. It looks like something from a culture where weapons are more than just weapons. So the lump on the side turns out to be an optic. Fine. It's clearly like a lock-on, some sort of lock-on before launch system. There are little animal heads arranged around the ocular lens, which seems like a really poor idea because you're going to be distracted by those. Never mind the fact that it's going to make the weapon cost a hell of a lot more than it needs to. The fins on the front of the tube at the front, that's the barrel. So the fins are purely decorative. The mechanism itself pops up at the back, and we load a munition into some sort of feed device, which then folds back into the gun, and you launch your rocket/missile. Because it's called a rocket launcher, but I suspect that there's a dumbfire option and a tracking option, which would make it a guided missile launcher, not a rocket launcher, if we want to get all technical about it.
Zone C captured.
So this is the same revolver, broadly, as the one that I first saw. Same design, basically speaking. It's got some differences in lines, differences in decoration. It has a different cylinder with an interesting arrow symbol on it. It's like I guess a rare version of that standard revolver from the game, is what I'm trying to get at. Its main feature is that you can fan it. So if you're not familiar with that, you need to watch some westerns, and it's a case of you hold down the trigger, so you're essentially disengaging the trigger ahead of time, and then you are pulling back the hammer and letting it go. It's a really bad idea. It doesn't work as a tactic. Did it first appear in movies, or did it develop in what became cowboy action shooting, where people try to find the most efficient ways to use old weapons on the clock against targets? And you do find that they're able to run Winchesters much faster than they would have ever done originally, just by sheer skill and maybe a wrap around the lever so you don't destroy your fingers. And one of the early skills that was learned, more for kind of exhibition shooting, I think, was fanning. Yep, so as expected, as it said on the tin, effectively you are fanning the revolver. So conceptually, it's not full auto because you are manually operating the gun every time you slap the hammer with the trigger held down. But as far as gameplay goes, yeah, it's full auto because the firing cycle is automated and you don't have to keep clicking or pressing a trigger. So in game terms, it's fully auto. In firearms terms, it's still manually operated. You're just firing it manually as fast as is possible. Although the rate of fire achieved here is actually significantly lower than what some of the cowboy action guys can do when they fan their hammers. So have a look for some videos of that, because it's really quite impressive what they can do. It's not something that was done historically, but it is physically possible. It's also really bad for your gun, so don't do it. Of course, that makes very little sense in this context, because the conventional version of the revolver has a non-functional hammer. You just pull the trigger as fast as you want, in theory. The only limitation is the recoil, waiting for the sights to come back down, or the game limiting you from clicking again. And then we somehow pivot to a hammer that does work and is how you are making the gun faster. It doesn't quite make sense, but it is based on this real technique of fanning. Thank you for watching, guys. That was the Guns of Destiny 2, which is a bit of an ordeal for someone like me whose head is in the realistic firearms most days. Some interesting designs, definitely. You can enjoy our own Royal Armouries channel if you'd like to, here on YouTube. We've got various social media outlets as well, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. If you really would like to, we have a donation scheme, and there's a link to that in the description. Either way, I'll see you guys again next time.